The sun was just beginning to set behind the tall buildings, painting the sky with orange and gold. The air smelled of dust and roasted corn from a nearby street stall. On the edge of the city, not far from a crowded marketplace, there was an open ground where children from the neighborhood gathered almost every evening. It wasn't a real stadium, just a patch of uneven earth with a few old goalposts made from broken pipes. But for the boys who came there, it was their favorite place in the world. They would bring an old football, patched and worn from too many kicks, and play until darkness made it impossible to see. Their laughter filled the air, echoing down the nearby alleys. They didn't have fancy shoes or uniforms, but they had energy, friendship, and a passion for the game. Among the crowd that gathered to watch them was a small boy, thinner than the rest, barefoot and covered in dust. His clothes were torn and faded, and his hair looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. Nobody really knew his name at first. He appeared almost every evening, standing quietly near the broken fence that surrounded the field. Sometimes he sat on an old stone, hugging his knees as he watched. The boys called him the Watcher. He never spoke much. He didn't join their jokes or laughter, but his eyes followed every movement of the ball. When someone kicked it high into the air, his gaze went up with it. When they cheered for a goal, he smiled softly to himself, though no one noticed. Sometimes, when the ball rolled too far from the field, he would run and fetch it, carefully wiping off the dust before handing it back. One of the players, a tall boy named Rico, was the unofficial leader of the group. He was confident, loud, and talented, the kind of boy who always wanted to be noticed. The others respected him and followed his lead. When he laughed, they laughed too. "Hey, Watcher," Rico would sometimes call out, spinning the ball in his hands. "You like watching us play, huh?" The little boy would nod shyly, not meeting his eyes. "You ever played before?" Rico would tease. The boy would shake his head, smiling awkwardly. He didn't seem offended. Maybe because he was used to being treated that way. Maybe because he didn't expect much kindness from people. Every evening went on like that. The boys would play, shout, and chase the ball while the small boy watched from the side. When the match ended, he would wait for everyone to leave before walking to the center of the field. He'd pick up small stones and pretend they were players. Sometimes when no one was looking, he'd kick an invisible ball, practicing moves he had memorized from watching others. His name, as a few of the market vendors knew, was Eli. He lived near the garbage bins behind a bakery. The bakery owner sometimes threw away leftover bread at the end of the day, and Eli waited quietly for his chance to pick up a few pieces. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him alive. At night, he slept under a cardboard shelter beside an old wall, covering himself with a torn blanket he had found in a dumpster. He didn't remember much about his family. Sometimes he would tell people his mother had gone to find work and would come back for him soon, though deep down he wasn't sure if that was true. Life on the street had taught him to smile even when he was hungry, to say "I'm fine" even when he wasn't. One evening after a long, hot day, Eli came to the field as usual. The boys were already playing, their laughter echoing through the air. He stood near the edge, clutching his empty stomach. The smell of freshly baked bread from the bakery nearby made his mouth water. He hadn't eaten since morning. "Hey, Watcher, you're back again," one of the boys shouted. "You ever get tired of staring?" A few others laughed. Eli didn't respond. He just smiled, the same quiet, polite smile he always gave. Rico jogged over during a break, his face shiny with sweat. He took a sip from his water bottle, then looked at Eli curiously. "You really love football, don't you?" Eli nodded. I like how they move. It looks like flying." Rico chuckled. "Flying, huh?" "Maybe, but it's not for everyone." He tossed the ball in the air and caught it again. "You ever tried playing?" Eli hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. "Once, and when I had shoes." Rico laughed lightly. "Shoes or not, it's not easy. Take skill." Eli looked down, embarrassed, but his eyes still followed the ball. Rico shrugged and jogged back to his friends. As the evening went on, the boys' cheers grew louder. They divided themselves into two teams and played fiercely. Dust rose with every step. Eli watched closely, memorizing their moves, how they passed, how they faked a kick, how they dodged an opponent. His lips moved as if counting, like he was studying the rhythm of the game. When one boy missed an easy shot, Eli's body moved slightly forward, as if his instincts wanted to correct the mistake. He didn't even realize he had done it until Rico noticed and laughed. "You think you could have scored that?" he called out. Eli blinked, startled. "Maybe," he said softly. The group burst out laughing. It wasn't cruel, not yet, just surprised. "You score? You don't even have shoes, man," one of them shouted between laughs. Eli's cheeks turned red. He wasn't angry, but something inside him whispered that maybe he could do it. He had spent so many evenings watching, studying, imagining himself on the field. When the match finally ended, most of the boys sat on the grass, breathing hard. A few drank water, others wiped sweat from their faces. The sun had almost disappeared now, and the field was covered in a golden glow. Eli stayed near the fence, still watching. Then, almost without thinking, he stepped forward. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The laughter from earlier still echoed in his mind, but hunger and courage pushed him forward. He swallowed hard, took a breath, and said quietly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear, "Can I play?" "For a piece of bread?" For a moment, silence. Then laughter. Loud, genuine, unstoppable laughter. Some of the boys leaned over, clutching their stomachs. A few clapped sarcastically. Rico stared at him with surprise, then grinned. "You want to play for bread?" Eli nodded slowly. "Just one piece." Rico looked around at his friends, half amused, half curious. "All right then," he said finally. "If you can score one goal against us, you get your bread, deal?" Eli's eyes brightened, though he tried to hide his excitement. He nodded again, his voice shaking slightly. "Deal," Rico smirked. "You sure you want to do this, kid?" "Yes." The others started whispering among themselves, some snickering, others shaking their heads. "This is going to be fun," one of them said. "He's going to trip before he even touches the ball." Eli didn't reply. He walked slowly toward the center of the field, feeling the rough dirt under his bare feet. The wind was cool now, brushing against his face. For a brief second he forgot about his hunger, his torn clothes, and the laughter around him. All he could think about was the ball, and the chance to touch it, really touch it, not just in his imagination. Rico tossed the ball to him. "All right, watcher. Let's see what you've got." Eli caught it with trembling hands. It felt heavier than he expected, but somehow right, like it belonged there. He placed it gently on the ground, took a deep breath, and looked at the goalpost in the distance. The boys gathered around, still laughing, waiting to see the spectacle. The light from the setting sun stretched long shadows across the field. Dust swirled in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a vendor shouted about fresh bread. Eli's stomach growled, but his focus didn't break. For the first time in his life, everyone was looking at him, not as the quiet boy behind the fence, not as the kid from the street, but as a player, even if they didn't believe it yet. He bent his knees slightly, ready to move, his eyes locked on the ball. His heart raced. His hands clenched into fists. He wasn't playing for fame or fun. He was playing for something much simpler, a piece of bread, and maybe deep down a little bit of respect. The ball sat quietly on the ground, waiting. The air felt heavy, filled with curiosity and laughter. The group of boys had gathered around in a loose circle, dust swirling at their feet. The sun was now a soft orange glow, painting everything in warm light. Eli stood there barefoot, his small body tense with both fear and excitement. He could still hear the boys whispering to each other, mocking and joking. But his mind was already somewhere else. He wasn't thinking about them anymore. He was thinking about the ball, the goal, and that one promise, a piece of bread. Rico, the tall boy who had agreed to the challenge, stood near the goalpost. He had that confident look, like someone who knew how this was going to end. "All right, little man," he said, half smiling. "Let's see if you can even touch the ball before someone takes it away from you." The other boys laughed again, but Eli didn't flinch. He took one slow breath, his eyes fixed on the ball. The laughter faded a little when they saw the way he looked at it. Focused, serious, like this wasn't just a joke to him. One of the boys kicked the ball lightly toward him to start. Eli stepped forward, his bare feet brushing against the rough ground. The moment the ball touched his foot, something changed. It was like his body remembered something that his mind didn't. The first touch was soft, controlled. The ball didn't roll away like they expected. Eli's movements were strange but quick, almost instinctive. He turned slightly, moving the ball past the first boy who tried to block him. The laughter stopped for a second. He kept going. His steps were light, his balance perfect even without shoes. Another boy ran toward him trying to snatch the ball. Eli twisted his body and let the ball slip past with a simple tap. The boy stumbled, missing him completely. Now even Rico's grin faded a little. The others exchanged looks. The game that was supposed to be funny was suddenly not funny at all. There was something about the way Eli moved. It wasn't lucky or clumsy. It was skill, real natural skill. Eli didn't hear their whispers anymore. His heart was pounding fast, but not from fear. For the first time in his life, he felt alive, like everything around him had disappeared. The hunger, the dust, the laughter. There was only the ball and the dream he had carried quietly inside him for so long. He could see the goalpost now, not far away. But Rico had stepped forward, blocking the way. He was taller, stronger, and sure of himself. He stood there, arms crossed, smirking slightly. "All right, Watcher," he said.
"Let's see you get past me." Eli slowed down.
The other boys formed a rough semicircle, watching closely. Some were cheering for Rico. Others were just quiet, too surprised to speak. Eli took a small step to the left. Rico followed. Then Eli moved to the right, quick, sharp. Rico followed again. Then, without warning, Eli kicked the ball gently between Rico's legs and sprinted past him. The boys gasped as the ball rolled perfectly straight toward the goal. Rico turned too late. Eli reached the ball first and kicked it hard. It flew across the field, spinning in the air, before landing right in the middle of the net they had made from old fishing rope. For a moment, the world went silent. Eli stood there, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling. The ball sat in the net still. Dust floated around in the golden light. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed. It was only when Eli looked up and unsure of what to do that he realized they were all staring at him. Then one of the boys clapped softly. Another joined. Then another. It wasn't loud, but it was real. Even Rico, still standing near the goal, couldn't help but smile a little. Eli's face lit up. He had never seen anyone clap for him before. His hands trembled slightly as he brushed the dust off his knees. "You actually did it," Rico said, half in disbelief. He walked toward Eli slowly. "You really did it." Eli didn't say anything. He just smiled, shy and proud. Rico looked at the ball again, then back at Eli. "You play like someone who's been training," he said. "Where did you learn that?" Eli shook his head. "I didn't," he replied softly. "I just watch." That made the boys exchange glances again. It didn't make sense. How could someone learn just by watching? Rico picked up the ball and walked over to his bag. He pulled out something wrapped in paper, the loaf of bread he had brought from home. He tore it in half and held it out to Eli. "Here," he said simply. "You earned this." Eli stared at it for a second, then reached out carefully as if afraid it would disappear. The bread was still soft and warm. He hadn't eaten fresh bread in days. "Thank you," he whispered. Some of the boys smiled. A few nodded. The same kids who had laughed at him only minutes ago now looked at him differently. They didn't see a homeless boy anymore. They saw someone brave. Eli sat down at the edge of the field, holding the bread in both hands. He took a small bite, slowly, savoring every bit. It wasn't just food to him. It was proof that he could do something right, something worth noticing. The sun dipped lower, and the sky turned purple. Most of the boys began heading home, still talking about what they had just seen. Rico lingered for a while, watching Eli. "You know," he said after a pause, "you've got talent. You shouldn't waste it." Eli looked up. "Talent?" Rico nodded. "Yeah, the way you move. It's different. You could play for real one day." Eli smiled but didn't answer. It sounded too good to be true. When the last boy left, Eli stayed on the field staring at the goalpost. The light was fading fast, but he didn't want to leave. He walked back to the center, picked up the ball they had left behind, and kicked it again. Not too hard, just enough to watch it roll smoothly across the dirt. The sound of the ball moving made him feel calm. He kicked it again and again, pretending he was still in the game. He practiced turns, dribbles, and passes to imaginary teammates. The stars started to appear one by one above him. The air was cooler now. Somewhere far away, a car horn echoed. But here, on this dusty field, it was just Eli and the ball. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged somewhere. He played until he was too tired to stand. Then he picked up the ball, placed it near the fence where he always watched from, and whispered quietly, "Tomorrow." He walked back to his little corner near the bakery. The streets were quiet now, and the smell of bread still lingered in the air. He sat on his cardboard bed, wrapped himself in his thin blanket and closed his eyes. The taste of warm bread still stayed on his tongue. That night, he dreamed of green fields, shining lights, and people cheering his name, not out of pity, but because they believed in him. The next morning came with the sound of vendors setting up stalls and children walking to school. Eli woke up early. His body ached, but his heart felt light. He washed his face with water from a nearby tap and went to the bakery's back door. The baker, a kind old man with tired eyes, looked at him and smiled. "You again, boy?" Eli nodded shyly. "You play football, don't you?" the man asked, surprising him. "I heard some kids talking about you this morning." Eli blinked, not sure what to say. "They were talking about me?" The baker laughed softly. "They said a barefoot boy beat them all. You must be good." Eli smiled, embarrassed. "I just tried." The baker handed him a small bun. "Well, here's something extra today. Keep trying, boy." Eli thanked him quietly and walked away, feeling warmth spread in his chest, and not just from the food, but from the fact that people were starting to notice him. When he reached the field that evening, the boys were already there again. This time, they didn't laugh when he walked up. Rico waved him over. "You playing today?" Rico asked. Eli hesitated. "If you let me." Rico tossed him the ball. "You've already proved you can play. We could use someone like you." Eli held the ball in his hands, smiling wider than he had in years. The ground beneath his feet was rough, but to him it felt like the softest grass in the world. That evening, as the game began again, there was no laughter or teasing. There was only the sound of the ball bouncing, the rush of feet, and the joyful shout of teamwork. And somewhere inside that dusty field, a new dream had quietly begun to grow. Eli no longer stood outside the fence. He was finally inside and where he always belonged. The days that followed changed everything for Eli. The boy who used to sit quietly behind the fence now stood on the field every evening. The same players who once teased him now passed him the ball with trust in their eyes. The laughter that used to mock him had turned into cheers. He had earned his place among them, not because anyone took pity on him, but because he proved he belonged there. The dusty ground became his world. Every afternoon he waited for the sun to dip low so he could run again, barefoot, fast, and free. The others still had shoes, some torn, some old, but Eli didn't mind. His feet were used to the earth. It felt natural to him. When he ran, he could feel every bump, every grain of dirt, and somehow that made him quicker, more balanced, more aware. Rico often watched him play and shook his head with a grin. "You're different," he would say. "You see the game before it even happens." Eli didn't fully understand what that meant, but he liked hearing it. Even people outside the field began to notice. Passers-by stopped to watch. Street vendors, on their way home from the market, sometimes paused for a few minutes to see the barefoot boy move with the ball like he was born to do it. The local shopkeeper once said, "That boy moves like he's got wings on his feet." Eli never played for attention. He played because it made him forget hunger, pain, and loneliness. When he was on that field, nothing else existed. One Saturday evening, a crowd larger than usual gathered near the open ground. The air was buzzing with excitement. Word had spread about a small neighborhood tournament, just a few local teams competing for fun and bragging rights. Rico's team had joined, and Eli was now one of them. It was his first real match. As the teams warmed up, some of the opposing players pointed at him and laughed quietly. "They've got a barefoot kid? This will be easy," one of them said. Rico heard it and smiled calmly. "We'll see," he replied. Eli didn't react. He just tied a small piece of cloth around his ankle, a habit he'd picked up for good luck. His heart was beating fast, not from fear but from excitement. He looked at the crowd, the goalposts, the ball, and everything seemed brighter, sharper. This wasn't just another evening game. It felt bigger. When the whistle blew, the match began. From the first moment, it was intense. The other team was faster, stronger, and better organized. They pushed hard, trying to dominate. Eli's team struggled to keep up at first. The ball barely came to him, but he kept running, waiting, watching, learning their patterns. Then, halfway through the first half, an opening appeared. The ball bounced loose near the center of the field. Eli darted toward it before anyone else could react. His small frame allowed him to slip through gaps easily. He dribbled past one opponent, then another, his feet moving so quickly that the crowd gasped. He didn't look scared or rushed. His movements were calm, confident, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. When he reached the edge of the box, he kicked. The ball curved beautifully through the air and landed right into the net. The crowd exploded in cheers. Even those who didn't know him shouted his name. Eli froze for a second, his eyes wide. Then he smiled, a real wide smile that lit up his whole face. Rico ran over and lifted him off the ground. "That's how you do it," he shouted, laughing. The boys surrounded him, cheering and patting his back. For the rest of the game, Eli played like he had been waiting his whole life for this. Every pass he made found the right player. Every move he tried seemed to work. His team won that match by 2 goals, both scored by him. When the whistle blew, the crowd ran onto the field. People were clapping, whistling, and some even offered him snacks or drinks. The barefoot boy who once watched from outside the fence was now the hero of the match. That night, Eli sat near his usual spot behind the bakery, holding a piece of leftover bread the baker had given him. The stars were bright above and his heart felt full. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about how hungry he was. He was thinking about the sound of cheers, that magical moment when everyone believed in him. In the days that followed, more people came to see him play. Some even brought their children to watch. "That's the boy I told you about," they'd say. "The one who plays without shoes." Rico started training with him seriously. He taught Eli how to pass better, how to control the ball under pressure, how to use his body to shield it from others. Eli learned quickly. He remembered every word, every move. He practiced late into the evening, long after everyone else went home. One night, as he was kicking the ball alone under the moonlight, a man stopped by the field. He wore a simple sports jacket and carried a whistle around his neck. "You play well," the man said. Eli stopped and looked up, surprised. "Thank you, sir. How old are you?" "I think. Maybe 12, Eli said softly. "You think?" The man smiled kindly. "I don't remember exactly," Eli admitted. The man nodded slowly, studying him. "You have good control. Do you train anywhere?" Eli shook his head. "No, sir. I just watch and play." The man looked impressed. "Well, I'm a youth coach at the community club nearby. We're always looking for talent. Would you like to come by tomorrow?" Eli's eyes widened. "Me? Yes, you. Bring your friend Rico if you want. Come by the sports ground at 10 in the morning." Eli could barely speak. He nodded quickly, his heart racing. "I'll be there." When the man left, Eli sat down on the grass, staring at the stars again. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Someone had noticed him, someone official. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this is the start." The next morning, he woke before sunrise. He washed at the public tap, brushed his hair with his fingers, and wiped his clothes as clean as he could. He didn't have new clothes or shoes, but he wanted to look neat. Rico met him on the way. "You ready?" he asked. Eli nodded, his eyes bright. "I don't know what they'll say, but I'm going." They reached the sports ground together. It was much bigger than their dusty field, with real grass and proper goalposts. Other children were already there, dressed in matching jerseys. Some of them had shiny shoes and even new footballs. When Eli stepped onto the ground, a few of the kids looked at him curiously. Some whispered, pointing at his bare feet. He felt a little nervous, but he remembered what Rico had told him. "Don't look down. Look forward." The coach from last night walked up and smiled. "You made it," he said. "Yes, sir," Eli replied softly. "Good, let's see what you can do." The tryouts began. The coach threw balls, timed runs, and tested control. Eli gave everything he had. He ran faster than most, dribbled smoother, and played like the ground was an extension of his body. The others tried to push him aside, but he never lost his focus. When it was over, the coach blew the whistle and called everyone in. He walked along the line, nodding and giving feedback. When he reached Eli, he paused. "You," he said gently, "you have something special. I can see it in the way you play. You're not just fast, but you understand the game." Eli's heart felt like it might burst. The coach looked down at his bare feet. "You don't have shoes?" Eli shook his head quietly. "No, sir." The coach thought for a moment, then turned to his assistant. "Get him a pair from the storeroom," he said. Eli froze. "Really?" The coach smiled. "Yes, you'll need them if you're joining our training program." Rico laughed and clapped Eli on the back. "You did it, brother!" Eli's eyes filled with tears, though he tried to hide them. The assistant brought a simple pair of shoes, and they old but clean and still strong. Eli held them carefully like they were made of gold. When he slipped them on, they felt strange at first, heavier than the ground he was used to. But as he walked, he realized they weren't just shoes. They were a symbol, a step forward, a sign that his life might finally be changing. The coach clapped his hands. "Training starts next week," he said. "Be on time. And keep that hunger, not for food, but for the game." Eli smiled, whispering softly, "Yes, sir, I will." That evening, as he walked back toward the bakery, the sky glowed pink and orange. He carried the shoes in his hands, not wanting them to touch the dirt yet. He couldn't stop smiling. He had once played for a piece of bread. Now he was playing for something bigger, a future. And deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. Eli didn't sleep much that night. He kept waking up to look at the pair of shoes beside him. They were old and plain, but to him they were brighter than anything he'd ever owned. He ran his fingers over them again and again, smiling in the dark. For years, he had walked barefoot on sharp stones and rough ground, but now he had something that belonged to him, something that made him feel like he was finally stepping into the world he had only dreamed of. The morning air was cool, and the city was just beginning to wake up when Eli left his small corner behind the bakery. He had washed his face, combed his hair with his fingers, and tied his new shoes tightly. They felt strange, heavier than he expected, but he didn't care. Every step made him stand a little taller. When he reached the sports ground, the other players were already warming up. Some smiled at him, others barely looked his way. He was still the barefoot boy in their eyes, even though he had shoes now. But Eli didn't mind. He wasn't there to prove them wrong. He was there to prove himself right. The coach blew the whistle and gathered everyone around. "Listen up," he said. "From today, you're not just kids kicking a ball. You're players. You'll train, you'll sweat, and you'll learn discipline. And if you want to make it far, you'll need heart, not just skill." Eli listened to every word carefully. Training started hard. They ran laps around the field until their legs burned. They practiced passing drills, shooting, and ball control for hours. The coach's voice was firm but never harsh. "Focus, don't just chase the ball, and understand it," he kept saying. Eli worked harder than anyone else. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but he had something the others didn't, a quiet hunger that pushed him past his limits. Every mistake was a lesson. Every bruise was a reminder of where he came from. At first, he struggled to play with shoes. His balance was off and he tripped more than once. Some of the other boys snickered behind his back. He was better barefoot, one whispered. Eli heard them, but he stayed quiet. He kept practicing after everyone went home, removing his shoes to remember how the ground felt. Then he'd put them back on, trying again and again until he could move the same way as before. After a few weeks, even the coach noticed. "You're improving fast," he said one day. "You learn like someone who's been waiting for this chance all his life." Eli smiled. "I have been, sir." Training became his whole world. He stopped caring about hunger or tiredness. Every morning he woke up early, sometimes eating only a piece of bread from the bakery before running to the ground. The other boys started to respect him. They saw how hard he worked, never complaining, never giving up. Rico came often to watch. He didn't join the academy, but he cheered from the sidelines. "You're getting good," he said one day. "Better than me now," Eli laughed softly. "You taught me the first game," Rico grinned. "Yeah, and now you're teaching me how far a dream can go." As weeks turned into months, Eli's life slowly began to change. The coach started taking him to local matches between different youth teams. It wasn't easy. Some players were bigger, stronger, and more experienced. But Eli had something special. He played with heart, always moving, always fighting for the ball. People started noticing him again, not as a street boy, but as a rising player. After one game, a local reporter even took a photo of him and wrote a short story titled "The Barefoot Dreamer." It wasn't a big article, but it made Eli proud. He didn't have a phone or a home to keep the paper, but the baker saved a copy for him and pinned it near the counter. Whenever customers came in, the baker would point and say, "That's our boy, the one who used to wait for bread. Look at him now." Eli blushed every time he heard that, but deep down it warmed his heart. Despite all the progress, life wasn't suddenly easy. He still lived behind the bakery, still faced nights when the cold made it hard to sleep, and still went hungry sometimes. But now, when he closed his eyes, he had hope, something stronger than hunger. One evening after a tough match, the coach called Eli aside. His tone was serious but kind. "You've been doing well," he said. "Better than I expected. There's a regional youth tournament next month. Scouts will be there, real scouts. If you keep working like this, you'll get noticed." Eli's heart skipped a beat. "Scouts?" "Yes," the coach said. "People who pick young players for training programs. Some even get scholarships. But it's not easy. You'll need focus and strength. Can you handle that?" Eli nodded immediately. "Yes, sir. I can." The coach smiled. "I believe you." From that day, Eli trained even harder. Rain or shine, he was on the field. Some mornings, the coach would find him already there before practice started. He ran drills alone, pushing himself until sweat poured down his face. The other players started following his lead. His determination was contagious. Even those who once laughed at him now asked for his help. He shared what he knew, teaching them how to move smarter, how to stay calm under pressure. The night before the big tournament, Eli couldn't sleep again. He sat on the grass behind the bakery, staring at the sky. The city lights twinkled in the distance. He thought about everything, the days he went hungry, the laughter from the field, the piece of bread that had started it all. He whispered softly, "Tomorrow is for all those days I didn't give up." The next morning, the sports ground was crowded. Tents, banners, whistles, and the energy was electric. Teams from different parts of the city had gathered, each wearing bright uniforms. Eli's team wore plain white shirts, but they stood proudly among the rest. As they warmed up, Eli noticed men with clipboards and jackets standing near the sidelines, the scouts. His heart pounded. He wasn't used to being watched like that. Rico had come too, standing just outside the fence. He waved and shouted, "Play like it's for bread, Eli?" Eli laughed and nodded. When the whistle blew, everything else faded. The game began fast, aggressive. The other team was tough, but Eli stayed focused. He ran, dodged, passed, and defended like he was born for it. Every move was smooth, every decision sharp. The crowd cheered when he made a long pass that led to the first goal. Later, when he scored himself, people were on their feet. Even the scouts started whispering to each other, pointing at him. But the most unforgettable moment came near the end of the game. The score was tied and only a few minutes remained. The ball bounced off a defender and rolled toward Eli. He didn't think he just acted. He flicked it up, spun past two players, and kicked it with all his strength. The ball flew in a perfect curve and landed in the top corner of the net. The crowd went wild. Eli dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. His teammates ran to hug him. Rico jumped and shouted from the fence, "That's my boy!" After the final whistle, the coach hugged him tightly. "You did it," he said. "You really did." As the crowd slowly cleared, one of the scouts approached the coach, then looked at Eli. He smiled warmly. "You've got something special, kid," he said. "Come to the academy next week. We want to see more of you." Eli stared at him, barely believing it. "Me?" "Yes, you," the man said with a nod. "Don't stop playing the way you do, with heart." Eli's throat felt tight. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. He just nodded, his eyes shining. That evening, when he walked home with the shoes in his hands again, he passed by the bakery. The baker was closing up, but when he saw Eli, he smiled. "You won, didn't you?" Eli grinned and nodded. The baker laughed softly. "I knew you would. Come here." He handed Eli a small bag. Inside were 2 pieces of warm bread. "For the champion." Eli took it with both hands. "Thank you," he said quietly. As he sat behind the bakery later, eating the bread slowly, he looked up at the sky again. He thought about how far he had come, from a hungry boy watching behind a fence to someone people clapped for. He whispered to himself, "It all started with a piece of bread." The night was peaceful. The stars looked brighter. Somewhere in the distance, he could still hear the echo of the crowd chanting his name. And for the first time, Eli didn't feel like a boy from the street anymore. He felt like a player, a real one. The morning sun rose softly over the city, painting the rooftops gold. Eli woke up early as usual, but this time something felt different. There was no heaviness in his chest, no worry about finding food or getting through another day. Instead, there was excitement, the kind that made his hands tremble and his heart race. It had been a week since the tournament, and today was the day he was supposed to go to the academy. He sat quietly for a while, staring at the small paper the scout had given him. It had the academy's name, address, and the time he needed to be there. The paper was a little wrinkled from being folded so many times, but to him, it was priceless. A key to a life he had only imagined. He looked around his small corner behind the bakery one last time. The empty boxes, the torn blanket, the smell of fresh bread from inside. It had been his home for so long. He touched the wall gently and whispered, "Thank you." Before leaving, he knocked on the bakery door. The baker opened it with a smile. "Big day, huh?" Eli nodded. "I'm going to the academy today." "I know," the baker said. "Hold on." He disappeared inside and came back with a small paper bag. "For your journey. You'll need strength." Eli took the bag carefully. Inside were 2 pieces of bread and a bottle of water. It wasn't much, but to him it meant everything. "Thank you for always helping me," Eli said softly. The baker smiled. "Go make us proud, boy. Show them what a hungry heart can do." Eli smiled, waved, and began walking. The city was alive that morning. Buses rumbling, people rushing, kids in uniforms heading to school. Eli walked through the crowd, his shoes tapping against the pavement. He still felt like an outsider among them, but he didn't hide anymore. His head was high, his steps sure. When he reached the academy gates, he stopped. The place looked huge. Clean fields, tall fences, buildings with shiny glass windows. Dozens of young players in uniforms were already practicing. Some had their families with them. Parents taking pictures, coaches shouting instructions. Eli hesitated for a moment. He had no family there, no fancy clothes, no bag filled with gear. Just his old shoes, the bread, and a dream. The coach from the tournament saw him and waved. "You're here!" "Good," Eli hurried over. "Yes, sir." "This way," the coach said, leading him toward the field. "You'll train with the youth team today. The head trainer wants to see how you play." Eli nodded, feeling his heart pound faster. At first, the field felt like a different world. The grass was soft and green. The players moved with sharp precision, and the air smelled of fresh turf and new beginnings. He tightened his shoelaces and took a deep breath. When practice started, Eli forgot his fear. Once the ball touched his feet, everything else faded away. The city, the noise, even the memories of hunger. It was just him in the game again. He played with the same rhythm that had always guided him, smooth and natural. The coach watched carefully, whispering to another trainer now and then. Eli didn't notice. He was too focused. He passed, dodged, and dribbled like it was the only thing that mattered in the world. When practice ended, the head trainer called him over. He had a kind but serious face. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. Eli hesitated. "Nowhere. I just watched and practiced by myself." The man looked impressed. "You've got raw talent. Real instinct. It's rare." He smiled a little. "You don't have to practice alone anymore." Eli blinked, unsure what he meant. The coach stepped forward and said, "They're offering you a place here, a scholarship. It covers everything. Food, clothes, training." Eli froze. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I can stay here?" "Yes," the man said. "From now on, this is your home." The words hit him hard. Home. He hadn't heard that word in a long time. He lowered his head as his eyes filled with tears he couldn't stop. "Thank you," he whispered. "I won't waste it." That night, Eli slept in a small dorm room with other players. The bed was soft, the blanket warm, and for the first time in years he didn't hear the noise of the streets or feel the cold air on his face. He lay awake for a while, staring at the ceiling, unable to believe any of it was real. Over the next few weeks, life at the academy changed everything for him. He woke up early every day, trained for hours, studied during lessons, and learned discipline. The other players started liking him, not because of pity, but because of his spirit. He never complained, never bragged, and always encouraged others. The head trainer often said, "Eli plays like he's fighting for something bigger than winning." And he was right. Eli wasn't chasing fame or trophies. He was chasing a promise, the one he made to himself on the day he first asked, "Can I play for a piece of bread?" Every weekend, when he had free time, he went back to visit the bakery. The baker would always have something ready for him, a smile, some bread, sometimes even small coins for the bus fare. Rico would join them too, teasing Eli about becoming a big player. One day, Eli arrived with a small duffel bag. Inside was his new academy uniform, crisp white and blue with his name stitched on the back. He handed it to the baker. "Keep it here. You're part of this too." The baker looked at it, his eyes soft. You didn't forget where you came from. That's what makes you special. Eli smiled. I'll never forget. This place gave me my first chance. Months passed and Eli's progress amazed everyone. He was selected to play for the academy's main youth team, traveling to other cities for matches. Coaches began mentioning his name in meetings. Reporters took pictures. People who once laughed at him now clapped when they saw him play. But Eli stayed humble. Every time he touched the ball, he remembered the boy who once played barefoot on a dusty street, hungry but full of hope. One afternoon after a big match, the head trainer called him in. You've been doing great, Eli. There's something I want to tell you. He paused before continuing. A professional club wants to bring you into their youth system next season. It's a huge opportunity. Eli's heart stopped for a moment. A real club? Yes, the trainer said. You'll have to move, but they'll take care of you. You'll have school, housing, everything. Eli didn't know what to say. He felt both joy and fear. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but the coach smiled and said, You are. You've already proved that nothing can stop you. When Eli told the baker and Rico, they hugged him tightly. Rico laughed. You're going to be on TV someday. Just don't forget us, little people. Eli grinned. Never. The day before he left for the new club, he went back to the old ground, the dusty field where everything started. The place was quiet now, the paint fading, the fence rusted. He stood there for a while, remembering the day he first asked to play for bread. The laughter, the doubt, the fear, it all came back. But so did the feeling of courage. He placed a small loaf of bread on the edge of the field and whispered, For the boy who didn't give up. Then he smiled and walked away. Years later, people would tell the story of the player who came from the streets, the boy who once played for bread and rose to play for glory. Some said it was luck, some said it was destiny, but those who knew him understood the truth. It was heart. Eli's story spread beyond his city. He began visiting schools and orphanages, telling kids, You don't need money to dream. You just need to believe and keep going, even when nobody believes in you. Every time he said those words, he meant them, because he had lived them. And sometimes, when life felt overwhelming, he would visit the bakery again, sit behind it like old times and eat a piece of bread. Not because he was hungry, but because it reminded him of where it all began. The world saw him as a rising football star, but to him he was still that barefoot boy who asked for a chance. And in his heart, he knew one simple truth, that sometimes a small act of kindness, a single piece of bread, could change an entire life.